Okay, so all right, it's recording. Um, so what did you want to talk about? I guess we talked about discussing like maybe like some reform stuff, maybe like revolution. Um,
No idea what just happened, but all right.
oh, did you hear me?
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, I just like cut out for a minute. I have no idea what just happened.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just asking. I guess we discussed talking about like reform, maybe like revolution.
hmm
Um, we can start wherever you want to talk
I just
about.
well, I just want to get a feel for your positions real quick because like I'm not like I haven't like studied you in like maybe years because it's been a while since we've like actually talked.
Sure.
So I want to get a feel. Where are you like right now, like politically?
I'm a socialist. I think
Hmm.
that like socialism is desirable. I guess the main aspect in which my positions have changed since we last talked is that I think like pushing for reform is like a valid way of moving towards socialism, and I generally like advocate for like reform over like revolutionary like kind of rhetoric, I guess.
Mm. Okay, so like, what do you mean by that? Like, what do you mean by like reform versus revolutionary rhetoric? What do you mean by?
Yeah, so I think that pushing for like reforms, like reformist policies, like I don't know, like stronger unions or like more government control over the economy, more social spending. I think it's
Mhm.
good to push for these kinds of things because A, it like helps people in the immediate sense, and B, I think I believe that we can push for reforms which create conditions which make it easier to advance socialism, I guess. Um,
Mm. Okay.
Additionally, I've sort of like I don't believe that things like violent revolution are like necessary or inevitable, and I think that I don't think that that's like good like rhetoric to be engaging in, I guess.
I don't know. I agree with you on the violent revolution thing. I am of the position that rhetoric does matter.
Hmm.
So I mean, I guess that puts me a bit more in the league of that puts me higher above some of the dipshits you deal with. But
Hmm.
um, I do agree rhetoric matters. I also don't believe that openly calling for violent revolution is a good idea. I do believe calling for revolution is a good idea, but openly calling for like a quote unquote like massacre of the bourgeoisie or some shit
Sure.
like that is stupid. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess when I say like not like I'm against violent revolution, what I mean is that like I used to there's like a lot of rhetoric it seems on the left about how like violent revolution is something that's just like inevitable because you can't like achieve socialism without the bourgeoisie like violently resisting or whatever, and so this is something like that's inevitable and that we should be prepared for. I think
Mhm.
like based on like the empirical and historical evidence, not only is nonviolent revolution that can like even like overthrow governments or existing powers. Not only is this possible, but it like tends to be more successful.
Hmm. Okay. So would you would be like something like Nelson Mandela or some shit like that?
Yeah, maybe. I'm not
Yeah.
super familiar with Nelson Mandela, but
Okay. Well, I'll run it by you real quick. Nelson Mandela led a bunch of anti-government protests, inevitably ending with the government resigning and then the elections held, and then he becomes the first president of South Africa.
right, right, yeah,
So like something around those lines would fit
yeah,
you.
I think so.
Okay, that's fair. Um, I do think reforms. Well, I do think like I struggle to like openly just be like no like because like my position has kind of shifted to like a less like abrasive position on voting.
Hmm.
It's more like I would say principled of like I don't as long as it's not like openly advocate like what is it openly like our own for our only goal like in in like our spheres I wouldn't give a shit because like I'm of the position that like it doesn't really matter who's at the helm, but like if you want to vote for somebody go right ahead, like it's not I'm not gonna go harass you about it. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, so generally, I'm of the mind that
Hmm.
It well, I think that it generally does matter who's at the helm. I think
Hmm.
that pushing for specific policies can make it a lot easier to I guess reach our inevitable like end goal of socialism. So like for example, in Finland, like over 90% of workers are covered by a union contract, and because workers have so much like organized power in this way, I think
Hmm.
just like last year, a prime minister in Finland attempted to it wasn't even a big deal. It was like the prime minister just attempted to cut pay for a certain kind of postal worker like to a small extent. And even that, like, I mean, in the U.S., shit like that happens like every day, and like nobody bats an
Yeah,
eye.
no, I was getting ready to say in the U.S., not
Right.
only would they have gotten their pay cut, they would have cut the entire like industry.
Of course, of course. But in
Yeah.
Finland, there's such large union membership because of like social democratic policies that workers in like a matter of like
Hmm.
weeks organized a general strike such that the prime minister who did this literally had to step down. Like the idea of like workers in the US like forcing Donald Trump to step down because he like cut the pay of a certain kind of worker is like unfathomable. And I think like once we're in a place where workers have
Hmm.
like that much institutional power and influence over like how society functions and what the government is able to do, it's that just makes it like so much easier to have a paradigm shift in the economy, because literally all you have to do is like convince those workers like, hey, let's do this, and it's done, right? Whereas like in the US, we would have to like build up all of this institutional power and build up and figure out how to organize workers and so on.
Yeah.
So like to me, and I mean like additionally like Norway, like over like half of the national wealth is like owned by the democratically accountable government. And if money is power, then like that is pretty substantial. So I think these kinds of policies can create conditions which make it like a lot more realistic to achieve what we want to achieve. Is like my position.
All right, that's fair. As long as you don't like openly like decry these policies as like revolutionary,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like I really don't give a shit. Like,
Yeah,
all right, like as long as you call them what they are and they're reform,
sure.
then like I wouldn't like openly be like my position like a couple months ago. You saw how I was a couple months ago. I've
Mm-hmm.
slowly come around to the idea of like, all right, whatever,
Yeah.
because like I was a little bit more abrasive towards these things, but now I'm of the position that like as long as they're not decried as revolutionary and like they're not like the main priority or like don't take up a sizable minority of our positions, then like I don't really care.
I think that like when it comes to what extent we should emphasize it. I agree that I don't think that reform should be like our only emphasis. I think like building like kind of like
Hmm.
grassroots organization and like a bottom up like worker power and these kinds of dual power structures. I think these kinds of things are really important, but I think that it is also important to focus on reform to an extent, because I think even like focusing on reform can make it a lot easier for us to build these kinds of dual power structures. So, for example, one of the studies that I was like referencing earlier with regards to violence and nonviolence, and I think this sort of data is like kind of important to focus on in this like conversation. It's by a guy named Chenoweth and Stefan. I guess if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll like link the study in the bio or whatever. But a few of the
Hmm.
main findings were like relative to violent mass movements, nonviolent mass movements are more likely to succeed by like 2.2 times that of like not, more violent movements. More likely, 2 times more likely to partially succeed, and significantly less likely to fail as well. Additionally, like movement success is positively predicted by nonviolence and number of participants, negatively predicted by population size and violent repression, and insignificantly predicted by polity score and target capabilities. So like things like violent repression, right, are like pretty important to determining, or how much violent repression there is in a country is like pretty important in like determining how likely your movement is to success or to succeed. um, and so I think like getting people like Donald Trump, or people who are more likely to like violently repress workers with like unmarked vans, like like getting these kinds of people out of power, and maybe getting reforms like police reform and military reform that makes the government less autocratic, I think empirically is likely to help us be able to build these kinds of dual power structures that are like more able to operate successfully, I guess.
Okay. Well, I want to question. I want to like question the like study real quick.
Hmm.
Like not in like like a crazy way. I just want to
Sure.
like be like, um, what do they mean by like violent revolution? Because like a lot of people have like a very weird idea of what a revolution is.
Yeah, so this study specifically was looking at like movements that, like, not just like any movements like the civil rights movements or anything,
Mhm.
but I think it was specifically movements that like successfully overthrew like a government or like liberated a country. And violent revolutions were just like defined as like mass movements which successfully overthrew a government, which like incorporated like violence in their tactics against like that regime, I guess. And like a nonviolent revolution is one that just used like primarily like nonviolent means, like maybe like general strikes and like protests and stuff.
I don't. I don't know. Like, can you like? Does the study name a couple examples?
Yeah, I can pull it up if you want.
Yeah. I want to look at this.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Oh wait, hold on. Hold on, I'm gonna have to like sci-hub it to like read specific examples. And um, okay. Um, I can. All right, I'll try to like find examples that were like listed in the paper, but I don't know how long that's gonna take. So like, if you want to like move on to something else while I look for that, um,
Okay. Well,
just to
yeah.
avoid having
I
too
guess
much
we'll just
there.
have to move on because like
Yeah,
I
sure.
want to like just dwell on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um. Um. So what's some? I'm trying to like remember. Okay. So like you would consider yourself like a market socialist in the short term, right?
Yeah, in the short term, sure.
Okay. So like, what do you mean by that?
So there's like two components to that. So for one, I believe that achieving market socialism through like reforms would, as I said earlier, make it a lot easier to like achieve the non-market socialism like as an end goal. And additionally, I think that whether or not like a fully democratically like planned moneyless economy would like function, is function well given like our current technological capacities, is like sort of like an open empirical question. Like I know that people like Paul Cockshott have like made papers where they argue for like the viability of like a fully planned economy. Um, but like I know there's like a lot of like controversy as to how viable a lot of these models are, and like ultimately I'm not going to say that I'm like completely confident in any of these like succeeding without like any sort of like empirical testing. Um, so I think like I would say it's like too hasty to try and like attempt like a fully fully automated like planned communist society like immediately. So I think there's inevitably going to have to be like some sort of a transitionary phase to that. um and yeah, so I guess that's like basically what I mean. um I can like describe like the components of market
Okay. So like,
socialism if you want.
yeah, go right ahead. Just because
Mhm.
every person I talk to has like a little bit of a different meaning, so
Sure.
I just want to feel it out for you.
Yeah, so like a lot of people advocate for like co-ops, and a lot of people advocate for like um I don't know, like different like kinds of structures. Generally what I advocate for is a sort of like system where the government owns like, sorry, I just fucking dropped my phone. Basically what I advocate for is like a system where like the government owns certain industries through nationalization. What isn't nationalized, there's still a market for, but the government partially owns every business in that market, or like the important businesses in that market through like a social wealth fund wherein it buys up like stocks of various companies, and then A uses that stock ownership to like direct those companies and the interests of the public, and B uses the revenue on those stocks for like social welfare purposes. And then also, of course, like you like incorporate like strong like sectoral like union policies to give like workers institutional control, as well as like co-determination policies, like putting workers on like boards of directors, or like giving workers like direct shares in the company and so on.
Hmm. Okay. So like in a like in a purely like Marxian sense of the word, would you acknowledge that this is still like just a form of capitalism?
And yeah, in like Marxian terms, because like Marx, to my
Yeah.
knowledge,
I
pretty
mean like in we're
explicitly,
talking
like,
like purely Marx here.
sure, yeah, because I mean Marx like literally
Mm,
defined like anything that still has like the commodity form like to be like capitalist. So
yes.
yeah, I mean that would be a form of capitalism in Marxist terms.
Yeah, okay. I was just I'm feeling it. I'm just trying to like
Hmm.
understand what you're saying because like I've argued with some of these like Rose Twitter bio people,
Yeah, sure.
you know, and you know how they are. So,
Hmm. Yeah, of course.
mhm. So I guess I I feel like I feel like we should advocate for more though. Like
Hmm.
don't you agree that like we should advocate for more than just market socialism? Because
Yeah.
isn't that kind of lame though? Like if we're like our end goal, I'm not saying it's your end goal, but like we reach to like quote unquote the end of history, and it's just co-ops.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't necessarily like advocate for co-ops as like the version of market socialism that I'm pushing for. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you that I certainly don't think that market socialism would or like should be the end of history. I don't think it should be our end goal. I do think that we should be like advocating in the meantime for like market socialism, reforms towards market socialism in the immediate sense, with like the eventual goal of like going beyond that. But yeah, that's what I'd basically say.
Okay, so I would personally like I personally wouldn't advocate for market socialism, but I guess that's just because we have a different idea of tactics.
Sure.
Um, what is it? I would I want to say that like we just I really don't believe that market socialism should be advocated for. Just I I feel like calling for like Protonian socialism, which is what market socialism is,
Hmm.
um, it's just such a like rhetorically like I get it's like it looks better in the short term, but like it's gonna come back to hurt you in the long term. If I don't know how to explain it though, like I feel like it could be used like as like a ploy, like people like advocating for like socialism, and then like later on people are like, but we already have socialism. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah, so
It's
like
kind
the
of like what they do in China, like right now, because
sure.
like people are like when people advocate for revolution in China, they're like, but we already live under communism. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So like the basic argument is that like um advocating for market socialism in the end would sort of like disenfranchise people from wanting to go further. Um
Yeah.
I think that's possible. I know like a lot of people I mean at the end of the day market socialism is just like an extension of like reformist means and I think if you look at like how reform has worked out in the past, like this is like a very common argument, like, well, if we like build up a welfare state, we increase social spending, these kinds of things, then people will just say like, oh, okay, we've reached the ideal state, we don't need to like go any further. But it looks like if you look at like historical trends, like social spending, for example, I think the like social spending as a percentage of GDP, the average in like 1910 was like 10%. And the average social spending as a percentage of GDP among countries today is like, I want to say like 30 or 40%. So it does seem like even like after they've achieved reforms, people are still like willing to go further. And I think like once we've achieved market socialism, um, like right now, what we would need to do if we wanted to achieve communism is A, convince people that it's a good idea, and then B, like organize the workers' power to have like a successful revolt against the capitalists, like revolt in the sense of like, organizing protests and like getting capitalists to like relinquish their power, right? Which obviously they're going to like be hesitant to doing. Um, Under market socialism, even if what you said happened and people decided they didn't like or didn't want to go full on capitalism, people already don't want to go full on capitalism. So we would still have to just convince people that communism is a good idea, just like we have
Mhm.
to do now. The only difference would be that it like after that the work is done, right? Because workers already have the power and all they have to do is like, okay, we've decided we want communism now, so let's move to communism. And it's like seems like a lot more of an easy and like seamless transition at that point.
Isn't the logical conclusion of this just dingism then? Like that's literally what this just sounds like to me. This is the same logic that I've seen like Marxist Leninist slash dingist like use to like defend China's policies because China uses the exact same system of market socialism that you're describing right now.
Well, I think that China has like a lot of key differences from like the kind of thing that I'm advocating for. I'm not like super like informed on like the economic structure of China, but I know that China's like a hyper like autocratic like one party state, and like workers unions are banned unless they're part of like the corrupt like a government controlled union. All of these kinds
Mhm.
of things I'm like completely against. Workers in China don't really have any autonomous institutional control over like their companies like they would in like the kind of system that I'm advocating for, where they'd have like independent sectoral unions and co-determination policies, and like direct democratic control over the government who's influencing the market. um, like I mean, if you want to look at like a country that's like approximating like what I'm advocating for, like it wouldn't be China, right? Like what I'm advocating for in terms of like near term market socialism would just be like a super amped up version of somewhere like Norway, right? Um, and I think the differences between like Norway and China are like pretty stark. Like China has like very high like inequality, like one of the highest levels of like income inequality like in the world, whereas like places like Norway seem to be like relatively egalitarian, relatively like democratic, and I think under these conditions again it seems like a lot
Wasn't
easier to achieve
wasn't the
socialism.
Norwegian communications like wasn't the Norwegian like communications like multinational company Telenor or whatever like that's nationalized by the government found to be selling weapons to Bangladesh rebels to overthrow it so they'd have better stock.
um I have no idea whether that's the case or not. If that is the case, then I think that's pretty bad. And I think that that's just like a company like acting in a bad way, but I don't think that's like an inherent like I don't think that's inherently like evidence of like a fault in like the structure of market socialism or anything.
But the thing is, this is like a government. This isn't like just a normal company. This is like a government-owned company that advocates inside. What is it? Something that you said would be what is it? What's it called? Um, that you said would be an amped up version of.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a little substantial when other Norwegian companies have been found to be like funding rebel groups or like doing shit with NATO or you know just like imperialistic tactics, basically. Sending finance capital, the usual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like again, I think there are certainly like I don't think places like Norway, or any of these like Nordic social democracies have gone like nearly far enough. I think there's absolutely faults in them, but I mean places that have attempted like um, I think we've seen places that attempt just like right away economic planning, like the USSR. These places have like acted in very imperialist ways as well. They've had their own faults.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
100% disavow the USSR, but that is
yeah,
that is a little strange
yeah,
to like
sure.
that like a lot that Norway as a state continuously does imperialistic policies.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think imperialism is like I I actually talked about this with Vosh like literally yesterday.
I didn't get to watch that part. I watched the Hakeem part and I was like, oh,
Mm.
Maldi's coming on. Then I had to go do some shit, so I couldn't do it.
Okay, gotcha. Well, so I think that imperialism is like something that's like very bad and something that should be like resisted against, right? But I also think that the existence of imperialism, like these kinds of like economic imperialism and so on, I don't think it would be any less incentivized under like a like communist, democratically planned economy. Because I think like okay, so a lot of people say like, well, look at like the capitalists have a vested interest in continuing to like exploit the global south or do the kinds of things that Norway's like government company apparently did for like financial benefit. But it's like, okay, well, if you replace the capitalists with the workers have the same incentive to do that like same kind of thing. Like, I don't think like I think if we made America socialist tomorrow, I don't think like workers in America are going to democratically vote to like decrease their own living standards and have like a scarcity of a certain resource, so that they can like liberate a country in like the third world or something like that. It just seems like incredibly unlikely to me that that would happen. So like I agree imperialism is a problem, but I don't think it's like specific to any of these different like economic systems or whatever.
Well, that's strange because imperialism, as like we know it today, came about as the highest stage of capitalism, being the five. You are aware of the what is it? The five tenets of imperialism, right?
Sure. Sure. So my question then would be, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the premise that imperialism arose concurrent with the development of capitalism, but my question to you would be, why, like, what incentive, if we made the US like a planned workers democratic planned economy tomorrow, what incentive would workers have to lower their own standard of living, to like liberate third world countries whose slave labor we're currently benefiting from? Like,
Well, that kind of seems like, I don't know. This It kind of seems like almost proto-Stalinist thinking to believe that the United States on its own could just become socialist. Like almost proto-Stalinist to me. Um, I don't know. I don't like the way you worded that, but I'm gonna try to work off of it.
okay.
Um, what is it? Well, the thing is with imperialism, I don't see how you can have imperialism when things like finance capital and other like tenets of imperialism just don't exist. And
Yeah, sure.
it would be like cooperatively like working together kind of thing than a more like a backhanded like stab in the like stealing of like in like expropriation of capital from a nation.
Sure. So like if the idea is like, well, the US would just like so like if the idea is like the US would become socialist, but along with that would develop some international like relations um with like other countries that that sort of like disallow the ability of like imperialism to like happen or whatever. Um like something like that, like a communist revolution happens in the US, but it like happens like in unity with like in communist revolution like all across the global south, and like
Mm-hmm.
out of like solidarity they just choose to stop exploiting them. Like that's like I mean that's possible, but I don't think that like the structure of a planned economy makes it like so what I'm arguing is that I don't think the structure of a planned economy in itself make to any greater extent disincentivizes like workers in more dominant countries from exploiting those in less dominant countries. And it's possible that along with a planned economy, you could have like a different international configuration that doesn't allow for this. But I think you could create that sort of configuration without necessarily having a planned economy. So I don't think like this is like an intrinsic part to this economic like system.
Well, the thing is, the thing is, like I said, imperialism like this just wouldn't be able to function under a system where there's no finance capital to send. So I don't know how to like.
Mhm.
I don't know. Maybe we're working off two different terms, but like I just don't see how it would work.
So that's what I disagree with. So like and this is like similar to like the argument that I made with Vosh, where he was like, well, capitalists profit from this. If there is no profit, then like what incentive is there to do this? And the idea is like, sure, there would be no like finance capital, there would be no profit in the sense that these are like capitalist terms, but I think there would be like things that essentially function the same way. So like for example, there would be no profit in a planned economy, but it would nonetheless be the case that by continuing to exploit workers in the third world, the democratic populace of working people in the US would still materially benefit from doing that, right? Like, if the workers in the US democratically decided, hey, we're going to stop exploiting this third world country, um, and now they don't, like, they're not getting, like, slave labor that they reap the benefits of, that means, like, scarcity of a lot of, like, resources and a lot of products that are no longer being produced because there's no longer this slave labor. Um, so like I still think there's an incentive, and I still think there's like mechanisms of power, right? Like if even if like the different communist countries are entering into like these different like contracts with each other, wherein they're saying like I'll give you this resource and you give me this resource, and it's kind of like this pseudo trade thing. There will still be mechanisms and incentives for more dominant countries to benefit disproportionately from these trades at the expense of like weaker countries.
Okay, well at that point we're just dealing with what is it, something that I can't really touch on because like we've never seen communism or socialism, so I don't know how I'd be able to like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I'd be able to like I don't know how I'd be able to talk about this, seeing as what is it, this is a completely hypothetical scenario wherein imperialism would have to completely change its definition, so
True.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, so the fundamental question here is like, and I agree. There's no empirical evidence for any of these claims because like communism has never actually existed or whatever. But the question here that I would ask is the fundamental question that seems to me to be most prescient is like, if we were to make the economy function in a democratic way without money, would there still be an incentive and would there still be mechanisms for more dominant countries to leverage power at the expense of weaker countries? And is there an incentive? Of course, because workers would still benefit, of course, from having like slave labor because that means like more products and more economic efficiency. Would there still be mechanisms? I mean, of course, there's even under a communist system, there's still going to be like certain like geographical relations that people can leverage. There's still going to be differences in like military power, it seems, or whatever. Or at least I see no reason to think these things like wouldn't be the case. So I mean, you're right. I guess it's possible that if tested empirically, it's not that's not how this would work. But I don't see any logical reason why that would be the case.
Okay, I think we're just gonna have to move on here because
Sure.
I really have nothing else to say on this one.
Yeah, sure. Is there anything else you
uh
wanted to bring up?
mm, uh let me think. I honestly don't know. Let me see. um I actually don't have anything else I want to bring up, but I do want to plug my Twitter.
Okay.
But I do want to plug my Twitter at underscore domesticated underscore, and shout out to my YouTube channel because I do want to actually upload on there when I can have the mental health to do so.
Gotcha. All right.
All
Well,
right.
thanks for coming on, bud.
Yeah. See ya.
Yep. See you, bud. All right. That was fun.